I remember it like it happened yesterday. Ethan leaned back in his chair, that smug grin. I hated so much plastered on his face. You still doing that? He sneered, pointing at my folder. I can believe mom actually thinks that set's a career. I swallowed. My hands were shaking under the table, but I forced a smile. It's important work, Ethan. Important? He laughed, loud and sharp, cutting through the room like glass. Important? You make what? A couple $100 a month? That sip's not important. That sip's pathetic. Mom Sip's eyes darted between us, her voice trembling. Ethan, please don't speak like that. Be kind. Kind, he snorted. I am just being honest. Someone has to tell the truth around here. Sep's never going to make it anywhere. I froze. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Inside I was screaming. I wanted to shout, to hurl the table across the room, to tell him he had no idea what sacrifice looked like, but my voice caught in my throat. I smiled anyway, polite, fake, like I had practiced 1,000 times in the mirror. Thanks for your concern, Ethan, I said quietly. Concern? He tilted his head mockingly. Yeah, I am concerned you suppose spend your whole life being useless. Classic. Mom tried again, softer this time. Ethan, please. Enough. He waved her off like she was invisible. And that was it. I was invisible. After dinner, I went to my room, slammed the door, and sat on the edge of my bed. My fists clenched. My heart raced. Why did it hurt so much? He's my brother. He's supposed to have my back, but all I felt was humiliation, burning through my chest. I could hear his laughter echoing in my mind. I replayed it over and over, that sneer, that casual cruelty, that belief that he was better than me. I wanted to cry. I wanted to throw something, but mostly, I just sat there, silent, letting the shame wrap around me like a vice. Then anger came, slow, cold, real. How dare he? How dare he make me feel small in my own home? In front of Mom? I thought about confronting him, screaming, telling him exactly what I thought. But I didn't. Not yet. Not when he thought he'd won. Instead, I let it sit. Let it simmer. Every laugh, every insult, every roll of his eyes became fuel. By midnight, I was lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene like a film on repeat. I could almost hear him again. You shall never be anything. But now, a thought crept in, sharp and cold, like a knife pressed to my ribs. One day, he shall regret this. Not just in a passing, empty wish. No, I could see it clearly. I would rise. He would see me, see what he'd missed, what he'd mocked, what he'd underestimated, and when he did, he'd know exactly how it felt. I clenched my fists so hard, my nails dug into my palms. That night, humiliation tasted like iron, rage like fire. But somewhere deep down, a plan began to form. It was quiet at first, just a whisper, wait. Then louder, watch me. Ethan might have laughed at me tonight, but the memory of that laughter, it wasn't mine to bear anymore. It was mine to remember, mine to turn into something else. Something unstoppable. I lay back, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, letting the anger settle. It was no longer just pain, it was promise. And I would keep that promise. I spent most of my days staring at the glow of my laptop, fingers aching, back stiff, coffee going cold beside me. Another late night, huh? Jenna, my colleague, leaned over my cubicle. Her voice was light, but I could hear the fatigue behind it. Yeah, just trying to finish the Carter proposal, I muttered. She glanced at my screen. You really go all in. I mean, some of us just survive the day. I smiled faintly. Survive, right. And that's exactly what it felt like, surviving. Every single day. Meanwhile, Ethan, my brother, he was laughing somewhere else, signing contracts, shaking hands, charming clients effortlessly. That smug grin on his face haunted me. I imagined it whenever I felt small and visible. Mr. Klein called my name from across the office. Hey, can you take a look at this draft? Make sure it steps. Polished. I walked over, careful not to show how much my chest was tightening. You're sure it's ready? He asked, scanning the pages like he already knew the answer. I double-checked everything, Mr. Klein. The numbers match. The graphics are aligned. He waved me off. Good, good. I just sometimes you overcomplicate things. Keep it simple. Overcomplicate. That's what he thought of me. My ideas, my effort, overcomplicated. Back at my desk, I stared at the screen. Simple, that's what they wanted. Simple, but I didn't want simple. I wanted to own something real. Something tangible. Something that would make Ethan choke on his smug laughter. Jenna popped her head over the cubicle again. Hey, you okay? You've been quiet all day. I laughed, but it was hollow. Yeah, just thinking. Thinking about what? My life on the ground. Scraping for recognition. Thinking about the big offices Ethan would walk into, shaking hands, sealing deals, while I sat here, unnoticed. The humiliation of that dinner, Ethan's laughter, it never left me. I could feel it like a bruise, but it was starting to feel different now, less like pain, more like fuel. After work, I stayed late, alone. The office emptied until the hum of fluorescent lights was the only sound. I pulled out my notebook and started jotting ideas. Marketing strategies, competitor analyses, potential clients. I wasn't supposed to, but I had to. I whispered to myself. One day, I'll own more than just a desk, more than just a title. My colleagues left, one by one, exhausted. But I couldn't. I wasn't done. Burning the midnight oil again? Mr. Klein's voice startled me. I turned. He leaned in the doorway, a little amused. Just catching up? I said. He raised an eyebrow. You are ambitious. I still give you that, but sometimes ambition blinds you. Don't let it get lost in it. I nodded. Yes, sir. Inside, I gritted my teeth. Blinded? No, I was seeing clearly, seeing what I had to do. For months, I stayed in that rhythm. Work, late nights, studying the industry, learning business secrets in secret, dreaming of owning something that no one could dismiss. No one, not even Ethan. Sometimes I questioned myself. Was it worth it? Was I chasing a dream that would always feel out of reach? The self-doubt was suffocating. I would stare at my reflection in the office window at night, wondering if the exhausted, overworked person staring back was ever going to be enough. Then I'd hear it, Ethan's laughter, echoing from that long-ago dinner, that sting, that humiliation. And I remember he doesn't get to define me. Power, I realized, wasn't in yelling or fighting. It wasn't in anger or revenge in the traditional sense. It was control, influence, ownership, and if I could learn it, master it, I could build something he could never mock, never undermine. The more I studied, the more I planned. Each competitor analysis, each marketing trend I dissected, each case study I memorized became a brick in my foundation, the foundation of my revenge. Quiet, silent, unstoppable. One night, I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. My notebook was filled with ideas, potential strategies, financial models. I whispered to myself, barely audible, it's steps coming. One day, he steps going to see me, and at one step be pretty. Because this wasn't just about a job anymore. It was about proving my worth, about showing Ethan, showing the world, that the girl he mocked was unstoppable. I closed my notebook. The office was silent, empty, perfect. I could almost see him, smirking, imagining I'd stay small. I smiled. Small, tight, and full of something new. Not anymore. I shut off my laptop, grabbed my coat, and walked out into the night. The cold hit me, but it didn't touch the fire inside. I was on the ground now, but the ground was where I learned to rise, and rise I would. I heard about it the next day. Did you hear what Ethan did? My colleague Marcus leaned over the cubicle, voice low but sharp. I frowned. What are you talking about? He joined Apex. You know, the rival firm. And get this, within 2 weeks, he's already leading the Thompson account. Above Jessica and Ramesh. Above everyone who Sep's been grinding there for years. I laughed, but it came out hollow. 2 weeks? That Sep's impossible. Marcus shrugged. Not if you separate him. He charmed the right people, sweet-talked the managers. And oh, the best part, he called out your proposal in the quarterly review. Said it was sloppy and poorly researched. Wait, my stomach dropped. He said that about me. Marcus nodded. Yeah, you weren't even there. They were in the meeting, and he framed it like you were incompetent. Everyone nodded along. Apparently, you should seen Jessica Spiss' face. I felt my chest tighten. My hands trembled. Betrayal, not just as a professional, as his sister. My brother, The one person who I thought at least had some respect for me. I clenched my fists. The words replayed in my mind. Sloppy, poorly researched, incompetent. The office felt colder suddenly. My coffee tasted bitter. My computer screen blurred. I whispered to myself. Barely audible. This isn't set just mockery anymore. It was sabotage. Pure, calculated, and personal. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to call him, to confront him in front of everyone, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I sat in silence, letting the icy rage settle in like ice through my veins. My heartbeat thundered. My mind raced. I needed details. I needed weaknesses. I needed a way to strike back where he couldn't see it coming. That night I stayed up, scrolling through Apex's website, reading news releases, studying employee profiles, LinkedIn connections. Every bit of information became ammunition. What steps he really like? I muttered to myself. Who does he answer to? Who protects him? Who would crumble if I pushed the right buttons? I scribbled notes in my notebook, filling page after page with patterns, alliances, and vulnerabilities. I drew mental maps of office politics, influential allies, and potential traps. Every tidbit about Ethan's new role, his shortcuts, his flattery, it all fed my plan. The betrayal burned like fire, but fire, if controlled, could forge steel. I imagined him at Apex, smirking, thinking he'd won. Every promotion, every public humiliation of me, it fueled something inside, something darker than anger, something precise. This isn't stat personal anymore, I whispered, voice cold. It's stat strategic. Every move calculated. I thought about confronting him directly, but the thought made me laugh quietly, bitterly. That would be too obvious, too satisfying for him. No. Silence, observation, planning, control. That's how this would work. I pictured him in meetings, name-dropping, charming bosses, undermining colleagues, and I saw his arrogance, his blind spots, every weakness I could exploit, every gap in his armor. I remembered that night years ago, the one etched in my memory, the laughter, the mockery, the public humiliation at the dinner table. That memory resurfaced, sharper now, colder, and I realized the seed of revenge was no longer a whisper in my mind. It was alive. I traced his career moves, noting patterns in his behavior, the people who laughed too easily at his jokes, the ones who hesitated before supporting him. I cataloged his alliances, his manipulations, the blind spots he couldn't see in himself. I murmured, almost to myself, every favor he took, every shortcut he embraced, every lie he smiled through, it'd still all come back, and he once did see it coming. The betrayal had cracked something open inside me, not just anger, not just hurt. A resolve, a purpose. I closed my notebook and leaned back in my chair. My reflection in the darkened window looked different, hardened, sharper, unrelenting. I whispered into the empty room, I will not let him humiliate me again, not in front of colleagues, not in the office, not ever. I turned off the desk lamp. The office was silent, empty, perfect. Ethan's betrayal had lit a fire I could no longer ignore, and I would make sure every laugh he'd ever thrown at me returned, quietly, invisibly, and with consequences he couldn't charm his way out of. I stepped out into the night air, cold against my skin, heart steady now, mind clear. The game had begun, and I would win. I started showing up where I knew he'd be: industry mixers, corporate panels, networking dinners, places where Ethan's charm reigned. Abdul, over here, Mr. Klein waved me over at one event, a drink in his hand. I smiled, polite. Evening, sir. You've got to learn to work the room, he said, nodding toward a cluster of executives. See, it's all about influence. Who you know, who notices you. I nodded, but inside I was already scanning, observing, calculating. Across the room I saw Ethan's people. The ones who laughed a little too easily at his jokes, who deferred to him before thinking. I filed their names away, their mannerisms, their weaknesses. Who do you know here? Mr. Klein asked, leaning close. Some clients, a few contacts, I said, careful not to show how much I was really taking in. He chuckled. You stir always quiet. You know sometimes it works against you. Don't be afraid to be seen. I forced a laugh. I stem working on it. Inside I was more than seen. I was calculating, Every smile I gave hit a mental spreadsheet, every handshake, a data point, every conversation, an observation. Did you meet Sarah at Apex? A coworker asked later. Yes, I said lightly. Charming, smart, but insecure, very impressionable. Really? They leaned in. You think so? I noticed, I said, shrugging. Just details. Details, that was everything. I started mapping patterns: who had real influence, who was corrupt, who relied on flattery to survive. Every executive had cracks, and I was learning to find them. At another networking dinner, I laughed at a joke Ethan had made in my absence, over drinks with some of his colleagues. He's really something, huh? I said, pretending awe. Yes, one of them said. Always knows exactly what to say. Too smooth sometimes, if you ask me. I nodded, smiling, hiding the thrill of discovery. Too smooth, too arrogant. That arrogance, it would be useful. I made small talk, asked questions about projects, subtly guided conversations to expose office politics. Who really runs things over there? I asked Sarah over coffee. Oh well, officially it sups Ethan, she said, sipping. But the board has favorites. People he hasn't said even met get pulled ahead. It sups complicated. I smiled, jotting notes mentally. Complicated indeed. Back at my office, Mr. Klein called me in. You set progressing well, I see initiative. But remember, knowledge alone doesn't elitist win, execution matters. Yes, sir, I said. Execution. That word echoed. That was my plan. Observe quietly, learn silently, then act decisively. I spent nights reviewing industry reports, cross-referencing clients, analyzing Ethan's company's structure. Every alliance, every insecurity, every gap in his defenses became a target. I realized the anger I'd once felt, the humiliation, the betrayal was gone, replaced by something colder, sharper, precise. I wasn't chasing him to yell or confront. I was chasing him to dismantle his world piece by piece from the inside. At an Apex seminar, I complimented his work openly, watched reactions carefully, who faked respect, who begrudged it, who crumbled under praise. I recorded it all mentally. Ethan really knows how to handle a crowd, I said, smiling at a colleague. Yes, they replied. But you notice the cracks too, don't you? I laughed softly. Maybe? Or maybe I just pay attention. Every smile I gave, every word I spoke, every handshake I made was a calculation, a trap in the making. I realized then that to win, I didn't need to confront him directly. That would be too obvious, too satisfying for him. I needed patience, subtlety, observation, cold precision, silent control. The more I watched, the more I understood power wasn't in the loudest voice, it was in knowledge, influence, quiet manipulation, and I had both, growing stronger every day. That night, alone in my apartment, I looked at my notes: faces, names, alliances, weaknesses, patterns. I whispered to myself, every smile, every joke, every favor he thinks shields him. I will use it. Every crack in his world I will expose, and he once did even see me coming. The anger of the past was gone. Only clarity remained. I was ready. And when the time came, Ethan's empire would crumble. It came out of nowhere. Abdul, Mr. Klein said one morning, leaning back in his chair, Espet got something I think you should consider. A chance to invest in a startup. Small, struggling, but with potential. I raised an eyebrow. Why me? He smiled, sharp and knowing. Because I've seen how you work. You notice everything, you analyze, you calculate, you don't set just survive. You adapt. I paused. That praise, it felt heavy, like responsibility and opportunity wrapped together. What sep's the catch? I asked cautiously. No catch, just commitment. You want in? I didn't hesitate. Yes. And just like that, the game changed. I poured everything into it: time, energy, focus, operations, leadership, finance. I learned how to manage risk, how to motivate people, how to spot weaknesses in systems and exploit strengths. Abdul, the numbers aren't balancing, one of the junior partners said during a late-night session. I know, I replied, scanning the spreadsheets. But here's SEPs where we can cut costs. restructure debt, and pivot the marketing. Trust me. They hesitated, but slowly they nodded. It was exhausting, demanding. But it was mine to control, mine to build, mine to turn into power. Meanwhile, Ethan, he was still strutting, still flaunting the success he believed he deserved. I just closed another deal, Marcus whispered to me one day in the office, nodding toward a picture of Ethan on LinkedIn, shaking hands with clients. 3 in a week. Think he even knows the people he SEP's signing? I smiled. Tight and sharp. He doesn't stet have to. He just has to believe he SEP's untouchable. And that SEP's when I made my decision. I wasn't just going to surpass him. Not quietly. Not humbly. I was going to control the company that elevated him. The company that rewarded his flattery, his arrogance, his shortcuts. The company that fired anyone who challenged him. Every meeting became a lesson in strategy. Every late night, a chance to study operations and finances. Every decision, a calculated risk to build influence, credibility, and leverage. Abdul, are you sure about this? Mr. Klein asked during one particularly grueling session. You're betting a lot. I'm sure, I said firmly. It steps not just investment, it steps positioning. I can make this work and then some. He nodded slowly. Good. You think like a leader now, not just an employee. I smiled, but inside, I felt a rush of something darker than excitement. Control, power, revenge disguised as strategy. I began attending board meetings, pitching ideas that improved operations subtly, always making it seem collaborative. Every executive I impressed became an ally. Every hesitation I noticed became leverage. I remembered Ethan, laughing at my mockery years ago, publicly undermining me at Apex. Every insult, every belittlement, every sabotage, I stored it away, like data for later. And now, I had the means to act. One evening, after a long day of negotiations and restructuring plans, I looked at the city lights from my office window and whispered to myself, he thinks he SEP's untouchable. He thinks he SEP's above everyone, but he doesn't SEP see me. Not really. Not yet. I worked tirelessly, learning everything I could about the company Ethan was in, their dependencies, their office politics, their blind spots. Every conversation, every interaction, every casual comment from his colleagues became a piece of the puzzle. Ethan really thinks he SEP's brilliant, Sarah from Apex said casually in conversation. But he can SEP see the cracks in the system. I smiled, pretending to nod in agreement. Yes, but he SEP's charming, isn't that he? Yes. Too charming. Too charming, too arrogant. That arrogance, that blind confidence would be his downfall. Meanwhile, my own company grew under my guidance. We acquired clients, streamlined operations, and became profitable faster than anyone expected. I wasn't showing off. I wasn't flaunting it. I was quiet, strategic, patient. Every time I saw Ethan's posts, his promotions, his public successes, a small smile crossed my face. Let him think he SEP's one, I whispered to myself. Let him strut. Every step he takes brings him closer to the storm he can SEP see. I realized then that empowerment wasn't loud. It wasn't about gloating. It was silent, steady, relentless. By the time I made my first major move, securing a critical client that Ethan's company had ignored, I felt it, the shift. The subtle, almost imperceptible tilt of power. He didn't even see it coming. I told Mr. Klein over coffee. He chuckled. That SEP's how it should be. Quiet, calculated, strategic. Well done. I nodded, sipping my coffee, letting the warmth settle. Yes, this was only the beginning. Ethan had built his empire on charm and shortcuts. I was building mine on skill, strategy, and patience. Every late night, every calculated risk, every moment of silent observation brought me closer to the day when he would realize that I had been the storm all along, and he would have no idea it was coming. I became invisible. Not in the office, not in the city, not in the world, but in the one place that mattered, Ethan's company. Abdul used to have been quiet about your latest investment, Mr. Klein said one morning over coffee. His eyes glinted with amusement. Are you sure you're not holding back? I smiled. Slow, deliberate. Maybe I am, or maybe I sup just patient. Patience. That was my weapon. I started acquiring shares under a pseudonym, small at first, almost imperceptible. No one noticed. Not the board, Not the executives, not Ethan. Did you see the stock movement? Marcus asked casually, scrolling on his tablet. Yeah, I said lightly, masking the thrill in my chest. Interesting trends, nothing to worry about yet. Everything was a game. Every subtle move, every alliance I formed, every quiet negotiation was a step closer to the storm I was building. Ethan, he remained arrogant, mocking, believing his position was untouchable. She really thinks she can make a difference, he said once, laughing in the boardroom, glancing at a colleague who dared question him. Cute, isn't said it. I watched from afar, every detail logged, every weakness filed. He had no idea, not a clue that the person laughing at him from the sidelines was the same person slowly tightening control. At networking dinners, I nodded along to compliments about him. Yes, Ethan Sepp's brilliant, really knows the right people. Too confident, maybe, one of his colleagues said. I smiled politely, hiding the excitement, thinking too confident, that's exactly why this works. Boardroom meetings became my playground. I made subtle suggestions that seemed collaborative, innocent even. Maybe we could consider reallocating some resources here, I said at one meeting, keeping my tone casual. It could improve efficiency, reduce risk. The executives nodded, impressed. Good idea, one said. I hadn't set considered that. Little by little, invisible by invisible, influence grew. Decisions I made quietly rippled through the company. Restructuring here, financial tweaks there, every move under the radar, under my name that no one recognized. Abdul, your insights are invaluable, Mr. Klein said over a late-night call. Are you sure you said are not showing off? I laughed quietly. No, sir. I said I'm just thorough. Meanwhile, Ethan continued his performance, shaking hands, collecting accolades, mocking anyone who hesitated, every arrogant gesture, every laugh, every misplaced confidence. I savored it. I remembered the humiliation he had caused me years ago, the public mockery, the dismissive laughter, the casual sabotage. You thought you were untouchable, I whispered to myself. And now, every calculated decision brought me closer to proving you wrong. Through strategic investments, I built alliances with minor shareholders, quietly consolidating power. Each meeting, each handshake, each casual compliment about Ethan's brilliance was a mask, hiding the reality I was orchestrating a takeover no one saw coming. You such really quiet about your involvement, one executive said casually over lunch. I don't set even know how much influence you have. I smiled, sipping my coffee. Influence is instead about noise, it's about results. Exactly. Late nights became routine. Analyzing trends, studying shareholder movements, plotting the next step. Every detail mattered. Every misstep of Ethan's arrogance became leverage in my invisible arsenal. One evening, I leaned back in my chair, staring at the city skyline and whispered, he thinks he Sepp's untouchable. But every laugh, every arrogance-fueled decision, its steps all leading here. To me, quietly, silently, irrevocably. I could almost see him pacing his office, convinced the company was secure under his control. I imagined the smug smile he'd wear the day he realized I was the one holding the strings. At a shareholders' meeting, I quietly suggested a relocation of voting rights, under the guise of strategy and efficiency. The proposal passed unanimously, unnoticed. Another silent victory. Interesting perspective, Abdul, Mr. Klein said afterward. I didn't realize how subtle influence could be so powerful. I smiled, letting it linger. It's not about being seen, I said softly. It's about being effective. Ethan had no idea. No idea that every deal he flaunted, every colleague he belittled, every shortcut he celebrated was being recorded mentally, cataloged and prepared for leverage. Every laugh he thought was victory, every promotion he celebrated blindly, every casual dismissal of others' work, all feeding into my storm. I felt a thrill, quiet and intoxicating, knowing that patience, precision, and cunning were slowly shifting the balance. He was blind, completely blind. You think you control it all, I murmured to myself, but control is temporary, influence is invisible, and I am everywhere. I left the office that night, calm, focused, unseen, untouched, but the storm, it was already moving. And Ethan had no clue the day was coming when he would finally see me. And it wouldn't be pretty. The day came. I walked into the office. Calm, Colleagues whispered behind closed doors. Board members glanced at me differently now. Respect, hesitation, acknowledgement. The balance had shifted. And then, Ethan arrived. Abdul, morning, he said, flashing his usual arrogant grin. Busy day? I nodded politely. Yes, always is. He leaned back in his chair, smirking, confident as ever. I assume everything's spades running smoothly. You know me, I like things under control. I watched him, calm, steady, beneath that confidence, cracks. Actually, Ethan, I said, my voice low, deliberate, we need to talk. Privately. He raised an eyebrow. Oh? Is that necessary? Yes, I said. It's SEP's important. We went into the empty conference room. The click of the door behind us sounded louder than usual. All right, he said, arms crossed. What step's this about? I leaned against the table, letting silence stretch. Let him feel it, let him wonder. You SEP built a reputation here, I said, but appearances can be deceiving. He laughed nervously. Appearances? Come on. I SEP earned my place. Everyone knows that. I tilted my head. Do they? His smirk faltered slightly. What are you? I cut him off. Ethan, the company you SEP taken for granted, the one you flaunted, laughed at, mocked. I control it now. Control it? His voice hitched, disbelief creeping in. What? What are you talking about? I have a controlling interest, I said. Every board decision, every vote, every strategy goes through me now. He stumbled back, voice rising. No, that SEP's impossible. I built this. I earned it. And yet, I said softly, almost cruelly, the board listens to me. They respect my direction. They follow my lead. He sat down, stunned, white-knuckling the table. This isn't set happening. Eastum untouchable. You were, I said, voice steady, calm, until patience, strategy, and observation proved more powerful than arrogance and shortcuts. Ethan Sip's face twisted, shock, confusion, disbelief. You can sit. I don't sit, understand. I leaned in closer. Do you remember how you mocked me? How you laughed at my job, belittled my work, sabotaged me in front of colleagues? His eyes darted, searching for an escape. That was different. That was different? I interrupted. No, that was the seed. The seed that SIP's grown into this moment. You built your empire on charm, on shortcuts, on fear. I built mine on knowledge, patience, and precision. He swallowed hard, silence filling the room. You think power is loud, I continued. It is instead. Power is quiet. It steps invisible until it hits. And now, it steps here. He leaned back, jaw tight. So what, you stir in charge? I nodded. Yes, every decision, every strategy, every move under my direction. His arrogance cracked, then crumbled. The man who had mocked my paycheck, sabotaged my career, laughed at my dreams, powerless. Abdul, you can set just. I can, I said, voice low, controlled, and I will. But first, I wanted you to understand, to see, to feel the truth. The empire you thought was untouchable is mine. He sank into the chair, stunned, silent. For the first time, I saw fear, not loud, screaming fear, but the subtle, slow dread of a man realizing he has lost everything. I let it linger. I wanted him to understand the weight of every insult, every betrayal, every moment he thought himself superior. You thought you were untouchable, I whispered, leaning back. But patience, precision, and quiet observation always wins in the end. He didn't answer. He just stared, the room heavy with the tension of his defeat. I stood and straightened my jacket. The company that fired you mocked others, elevated arrogance over merit. It's such in my control now. He slumped further. I can believe it. You will, I said. Eventually, and by then it one stet matter. The decisions I make, the directions I take, you one stet have a say. You one stet even be able to interfere. Silence. A long, heavy silence. And then he muttered, almost inaudibly, I underestimated you. You did, I said. But that SEP's over. Now you watch, quietly, and learn what true power looks like. I walked out of the room, feeling satisfaction. Quiet, cold, undeniable. In the office, board members looked at me differently now. Subtle nods, deference, acknowledgement. The shift was complete. Ethan followed behind me, silent, defeated. The man who had once controlled everything in his path, my mockery, my career, my ambitions, was powerless. And I had the final word. For the first time, the humiliation, the anger, the betrayal, all of it felt resolved. I wasn't gloating. I didn't need to. The victory itself, the quiet satisfaction of watching arrogance crumble under patient strategy, was enough. The storm had arrived. And Ethan, he had no idea how quietly it had been brewing. The restructuring was subtle, surgical, almost invisible until it wasn't. Board meetings became my theater. Presentations, memos, updates, every document, every report, every internal audit was calibrated to expose the cracks Ethan had hidden behind arrogance and charm. Abdul? I don't understand, a junior executive whispered nervously after a meeting. Why are these discrepancies so public? I smiled faintly. Discrepancies always exist. They just need the right lens. The lens, of course, was mine. Projects Ethan had mishandled, contracts he had botched, decisions he'd made on blind confidence, all came to light. Not with glee, not with malice, but with precision. The truth has a way of speaking louder than any insult. Ethan, we need to discuss the Q2 projections, one of the investors said, voice tight. Some of these numbers they are concerning. He stumbled over words, tried to charm his way out. No, it's fine, just minor adjustments. Minor adjustments? The room knew. Everyone knew. I watched from my office doorway, silent, steady, every glance, every whisper, every subtle shift in posture of employees and investors. It was intoxicating. He called a meeting to defend himself. The boardroom was tense. Colleagues glanced at each other, quietly noting the cracks. I don't understand. How could this happen? Ethan stammered. I handled everything personally. These errors, these losses. It doesn't make sense. A senior manager shook her head. It's all documented, Ethan. All approvals, all decisions traced back to you. It's not about blame. It's about responsibility. I leaned back against the wall, silent, watching the unraveling. You can he said, voice rising, panic creeping in. I led this company. I You led it exactly how you always did, I interrupted, calm, with arrogance, shortcuts, and blind confidence. And now everyone sees what that really costs. His jaw tightened. Abdul, you can do this to me. Do this? I asked softly. I didn't do anything, I just allowed the truth to speak. That's all. A board member cleared their throat. Ethan, the investors are asking for accountability. We need to restructure leadership roles. He looked around, eyes wide, disbelief settling in. Every laugh he had given, every colleague he belittled, every time he mocked me, all of it had led here. Later he stormed into my office. The door clicked behind him. Abdul, he spat, pacing. This is unbelievable. How could you let this happen? I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I just leaned back in my chair, calm. Remember how you laughed at me? I asked softly. He froze, silence. His chest heaved. You wouldn't dare. I smiled faintly. I didn't have to. His face twisted. I can believe this. You. Believe it, I said. Every misstep you made, every project you mishandled, every arrogant word you spoke, they are all here for everyone to see. You didn't need me to ruin you. You did that yourself. He stared, shaking. This can be happening. Not like this. Oh, but it is, I said. And it's simple. Truth always finds a way. No lies, no manipulation, just facts. You built your house on sand, Ethan, and now it's collapsing. He turned, pacing, muttering under his breath. I can This isn't fair. Fair? I repeated, voice quiet, deliberate. You think this is about fairness? No, this is about consequences, about accountability, about the choices you made and the arrogance that blinded you. That it. His shoulders slumped. For the first time I saw him smaller, human, vulnerable, the opposite of the man who had mocked me years ago. The employees whispered in the halls, watching, observing. Some avoided him, unsure of what to say. Some looked at me, subtle nods of acknowledgement. The shift in power was complete. And all I had done was nothing. I didn't humiliate him. I didn't yell. I didn't launch personal attacks. The truth did it all. I watched him leave my office, shoulders slumped, the weight of failure settling like a cloak around him. I exhaled quietly, letting the tension in my chest release. The catharsis was slow, deep, satisfying, not cruel, not petty, just justice, poetic and complete. A colleague peeked in. "Abdul, is he gone for good?" I nodded, eyes steady. "For now. The company is safe. And he knows the truth. That sip's enough." I walked back to the window, looking at the skyline, city lights twinkling. The company was mine, not just legally, financially, but morally. Every misstep Ethan had made was accounted for. Every laugh he had at my expense returned to him tenfold, silently, perfectly. And I had done it without stooping to cruelty, without yelling, without revenge, without drama. The truth alone had sufficed. I whispered to myself. "You built your empire on arrogance, Ethan. You mocked, you sabotaged, you laughed. And now, you're powerless. All because you couldn't see beyond yourself." Poetic justice, finally. Quiet, complete, perfect. I turned back to my office, ready to lead. The storm had passed, and for once the air was calm, controlled, mine. The office was quiet. The storm had passed. The boardrooms were calm. The whispers had stopped. Only the hum of the city outside and the faint click of my keyboard filled the space. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the skyline. Neon lights flickered on distant towers, indifferent to my victories, unaware of the battles fought within these walls. My phone buzzed. "Mother, Abdul?" Her voice came through, soft but steady, pride finally threading through it.
I I saw the news. You did it.
I smiled quietly, letting the moment stretch. "Yes, Mom, it's just done." "I feel proud of you," she said, a tremor of emotion breaking through her usual calm. "You've grown into someone incredible." I swallowed, eyes misting. "Thanks, Mom. It wasn't so easy." "I know," she said. "But you've shown me patience, cunning, strength, all of it. You didn't just fight back. You built yourself up. You rose." Her words lingered in my mind. I realized she saw me not as Ethan's sister anymore, not as the one who had endured mockery, but as a force, a presence, someone who had earned respect through intellect, strategy, and resilience. I looked around my office. The scars remained, not physical but emotional. Every late night, every whispered insult, every doubt I'd carried, they were still there. But so was the pride of creation, of power, of control. I whispered to myself, softly, almost reverently, "I did this. I built this. And no one can take it away." A knock at the door. Mr. Klein, my mentor. "You stepper quiet today," he said, leaning casually against the frame. Reflecting. "Always," I replied. "The dust settles, and then, you notice everything you built, and everything you survived." He nodded slowly. "And what do you see?" I smiled faintly, looking at the skyline again. "I see patience rewarded. I see strength proven. I see freedom. I see a future that sips mine, not shaped by anyone else sips arrogance or mockery." He chuckled. "And Ethan?" I let a pause linger. A memory. A lesson. A reminder of what human arrogance can do, and what patience, cunning, and persistence can overcome. He smiled, approving. "You've learned more than revenge. You've learned power. True power isn't set loud. It isn't set cruel. It seps calm, precise. And most importantly, it seps yours because you earned it." "Yes," I said softly. "It seps mine, not because I took it from someone else, but because I proved to myself that I deserved it, that I can rise, no matter who tries to push me down." Mother's voice echoed in my mind again. "You've grown into someone incredible." I realized then that revenge isn't hate. It isn't destruction. It's proving your worth. It's patience, resilience, and the quiet satisfaction of rising above. Ethan's mockery, his sabotage, they didn't define me. I did. I leaned forward, placing my hands on the desk. Every contract, every strategy, every calculated decision that had brought me here, they were mine. I hadn't just survived. I had thrived. I had turned humiliation into power, laughter into lessons, and doubt into fuel. Mr. Klein, Sep's voice broke through my reflection. You stir ready for whatever comes next. And I have no doubt, you stir continue to rise. I have to, I said firm. Not for him, not for anyone, but for myself. For what I Sep earned, what I Sep proven, and who I am. I stared at my reflection in the glass. Stronger now, wiser, unbroken, not just Ethan's sister, not just a survivor, I was a force, recognized not for who I had been, but for who I had become. Mother called again later, voice warm, almost trembling. Abdul, just remember, no one can ever take this from you, not him, not anyone. Yusef earned everything. I closed my eyes, letting a quiet smile spread across my face. I know, Mom, I know. And in that moment, I truly felt it, the culmination of years of struggle, pain, and strategy, the triumph of proving myself, the closure of a chapter written in patience, cunning, and intelligence. Ethan was a lesson. The world was mine. I rose from my chair, straightened my jacket, and walked to the window. The city stretched endlessly before me, lights glittering like possibilities. I whispered to the night, I am here, I am recognized. And this time, the world knows my name, not as someone's sister, but as my own force, unstoppable, undeniable. The scars remained, but so did the pride, so did the strength, so did the quiet, unshakable triumph. And I rose above it all. The office was calm. The storm had passed months ago, yet the echoes of it lingered, not in fear, not in chaos, but in a quiet satisfaction I felt every morning. I poured my coffee, watching sunlight hit the polished floors. The city outside moved. Oblivious to the battles fought in boardrooms and offices, life went on. I went on. Occasionally, the news caught my eye. Ethan, a new job, smaller company, struggling, quietly humiliated. No headlines, no grand announcements, just a man learning humility the hard way. I smiled to myself. Small, private, uncelebrated. That's all it ever needed to be. My victory didn't need applause. I leaned back in my chair, letting memories drift. The laughter, the mockery, the sneers, once raw searing, were now fuel. Lessons in patience. Proof that intelligence, strategy, and determination could turn even the deepest scars into triumphs. No one knew the hours I spent late at night. The plans I drew, erased, redrawn. The silent observations, the alliances, the investments, the careful patience that built everything while Ethan remained blind, arrogant, untouchable in his own mind. I whispered to the empty room, almost a confession. I didn't just reclaim a company, I reclaimed myself. It wasn't about gloating, never about revenge. It was about dignity, about proving to myself that I could rise above cruelty, mockery, and underestimation. A knock at the door. My assistant. Meeting in 5, Miss Wahab, she said. I nodded. Thank you. As I turned back to my office window, I thought of how far I'd come. The woman who once hid behind polite smiles, swallowed insults, and endured humiliation, she was gone. In her place stood someone calm, resolute, and recognized. Not as someone's sister, not as a victim, not as a shadow in someone else's story, but as a force, an architect of her own destiny. Ethan's name might still cross my mind now and then, a glimpse in the paper, a story in the news, but never with anger, only a quiet acknowledgement. He had played his part in my story, yes, but I had written the ending. And it was mine. I walked to my desk, fingers brushing over contracts, strategies, and plans that had all been painstakingly built. My life, my company, my terms. The world could recognize me now, not for the sister I once was, but for the woman I had become. I allowed myself one last private smile. The past, the mockery, the betrayal, it was all a shadow behind me now. Every scar had become a mark of resilience. Every insult had fueled precision. Every doubt, every slight, every laugh at my expense had forged me into someone unstoppable. I was done with hate, done with bitterness, done with letting others define my worth. The story ended here, on my terms. Quietly, calmly, completely. I am no longer just the sister he mocked. I am the woman who owns the company. And I am finally at peace.